A piercing scream shattered the quiet morning air of Maplewood Heights. AAA, OAA. Oh my God, help me. The voice belonged to Bella Turner, the HOA president and self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. I, Stephen Edwards, 56 years old, set down my coffee cup and smiled. I knew exactly what had just happened. From my porch, I watched as Bella jumped back, clutching her hand trapped tight inside my mailbox, or more precisely inside the gopher trap I'd placed there the night before. It wasn't lethal, just educational. Enough to make her think twice before stealing from me again. Neighbors poured out of their houses, gasping at the sight. The self-righteous Karen of Maplewood Heights, now howling in pain, caught red-handed literally. I took another calm sip of coffee, the morning sun glinting off my glasses. After weeks of her stealing, my mail karma finally had a sound, and it was the snap of steel on skin. She wanted to see my mail so badly, I muttered. Well, now she felt it. Before we dive in, drop your city and local time in the comments below, and make sure to hit that subscribe button because the twist at the end, oh, it's worth it. The thing about living in a homeowners association is this peace is never free. You pay for it with meetings, memos, and a constant stream of passive-aggressive emails about the community standards everyone's supposed to follow. When I first moved to Maplewood Heights, I thought I'd found a quiet suburban dream, perfect lawns, white fences, a place where people waved when they drove by and pretended to care about your day. My wife Linda and I had worked our entire lives for a little patch of quiet. After 25 years as a federal postal inspector, I wanted nothing more than to tend my garden, sip my coffee, and watch the sun rise without paperwork or politics. Then I met Bella Turner. Bella wasn't evil, not in the usual sense. She didn't rob banks or set houses on fire. She just believed she was the law. She ran the HOA like a queen runs a kingdom through intimidation, gossip, and fines. Every homeowner in Maplewood Heights feared her clipboard more than they feared property taxes. She was always out early, wearing those bright blazers, pink, red, sometimes orange, marching from yard to yard like a self-appointed inspector general. One morning she scolded my neighbor George Miller for leaving his garbage can visible from the road. The fine, $50. Another time she made Mrs. Jacobs repaint her mailbox because the color didn't align with the HOA aesthetic. Everyone laughed about it behind her back. But nobody dared to challenge her. At first I ignored her. I had better things to do, pruning my hedges, repainting my fence, mailing Linda's birthday cards to our kids in Denver. Life was simple, until the day my mail started to vanish. The first time it happened, I thought it was just the postal system being the postal system. Packages went missing all the time. Maybe the mailman slipped up. But then it happened again and again. A bill from the power company gone. A delivery notice from the bank missing. A small package from my son vanished completely. I went down to the post office to check. My old colleague, Eddie Morales, was the postmaster there. We'd served together years ago. When I explained, he frowned. Stephen, everything's been scanned and marked delivered. Our system doesn't lie. He was right. USPS tracking is accurate down to the second, which meant someone had taken the mail after it was delivered. That night, I stayed up late thinking. Theft of mail wasn't just petty mischief, it was a federal crime. I'd put people behind bars for less. But now it was personal. I started keeping notes, dates, times what went missing. I asked the neighbors casually if they'd lost anything. Most said no, but a few hesitated before admitting small things. My Netflix DVD never arrived, or I never got my insurance card. A pattern was forming, and every time I walked past my mailbox, I'd see Bella strolling by with that same smug smile clipboard tucked under her arm. One morning I caught her staring at my front yard as if she owned it. She waved and called out, "Just checking for violations, Stephen. You know, keeping our community beautiful." I smiled back, but inside something twisted. A week later, my patience snapped. I'd been waiting for an important property tax statement from the county clerk's office. Without it, I couldn't complete my appeal. It was supposed to arrive Friday. It didn't. Saturday came nothing. Monday, still nothing. I checked the tracking. Delivered 9:14 a.m. front mailbox. I stood there staring at that single line on the screen. My jaw tightened. My blood pressure rose. I walked outside, looked at the mailbox, and for a brief, dangerous second I imagined it growling back at me. That was when Linda appeared behind me holding a cup of tea. "It's just a letter, honey," she said softly. "Let it go. You know how she is." "Yeah," I muttered. "That's the problem." Because I did know how she was. The next morning I went to the hardware store and bought a mini trail camera. Small, motion-activated, nearly invisible. I installed it inside a flower pot facing the mailbox. I told Linda it was for bird watching. She just smiled and shook her head. For 3 nights I checked the footage. Nothing but raccoons, passing cars, and one drunk teenager cutting through the lawn. Then came Wednesday night. 2:47 a.m. The camera detected motion. The footage showed Bella Turner unmistakable, even in infrared, creeping up to my mailbox in her bright pink blazer and white sneakers. She glanced around, pulled out a small flashlight, and opened the lid. She reached in, took several envelopes, and tucked them neatly into her folder. Then, just before leaving, she whispered something the microphone barely caught. Community inspection complete. I paused the video. Rewound. Played it again. My jaw dropped. The HOA president, the same woman who fined people for grass length, was stealing federal mail. I laughed out loud, half in disbelief, half in fury. 25 years enforcing federal postal law, and the universe had just handed me a case right on my front lawn. The next day I took the footage to the sheriff's office. Deputy Mark Collins, a level-headed man in his 50s, watched the clip twice, then sighed. "Stephen, this is good evidence, but she's claiming she's doing routine mailbox inspections for the HOA. Technically, that's not mail theft unless you can prove intent. She's opening mail that's addressed to me," I snapped. "I get it, but without catching her with opened or discarded mail, I can't make an arrest." Bella, of course, denied everything when the deputy questioned her. She twisted her story so fast you'd think she'd rehearsed it. "I was just making sure the mailboxes were secure. We've had vandals lately. I was protecting the community." Mark had no choice but to let her go with a warning. When she walked past my house later that day, she waved the same fake sugary smile. But this time her eyes said it all: "You can't touch me." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the footage on my laptop. Over and over, her face appeared under that flashlight glow, smug, superior, untouchable. Linda came downstairs, rubbing her eyes. "You're still on that," she said. "Yeah," I replied quietly. But not for long. The next morning, while trimming the hedges, an idea struck me, simple, effective, poetic. In my storage shed, I still had a few gopher traps from the years I'd spent on my father's farm. I'd used them to catch burrowing pests that tore up the soil. They weren't deadly, just designed to close sharply when triggered. Painful, yes. Dangerous, not really. And suddenly I realized a mailbox wasn't much different from a burrow. The metaphor made me grin. Of course it wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. It was about education. If Bella wanted to stick her hand where it didn't belong, she deserved to learn what consequences felt like. That night, I went out with a flashlight and a screwdriver. I modified one of the traps, adjusted the tension, made sure it wouldn't cause serious harm. Then I set it carefully inside the mailbox, just beneath the lip. To anyone opening it too eagerly, it would snap shut fast and loud. Linda caught me sneaking back inside. "You're up to something," she said. "Just improving security," I replied, smiling. "Stephen, trust me, dear. You'll thank me later." By the time the sun rose, everything was ready. I brewed my coffee, sat on the porch, and waited. At exactly 8:02 a.m., Bella appeared, pink blazer, clipboard, same arrogant stride. She stopped at my mailbox, pretending to jot something down. Then she leaned in, pulled the latch, and opened it. Snap, the sound echoed down the street. Her scream followed half a second later. That was the morning peace in Maplewood Heights finally ended and justice began. The scream rolled down the street like a siren, and doors flew open. Neighbors spilled out in pajamas and sandals, clutching mugs and phones. Bella Turner hopped backward, clutching her hand, eyes wide with injured outrage. The gopher trap still pinched her skin where curiosity met consequence. I stood calm as a judge. "Don't move," I called. "You'll make it worse. I'll release it." "Don't you touch me," she shrieked, staggering, pink blazer, flashing under the Sunday. "You tried to kill me, Stephen." I walked up anyway, slow and steady. "It's not lethal," I said, sliding the safety tab and easing the spring back. "It's a deterrent." As the tension released, Bella jerked her hand out and stumbled onto the grass. A bright red line marked her skin like an underline under the word guilty. She spun to the growing crowd. "He's booby-trapping mailboxes. On HOA property, call the police." "It's not HOA property," I said, voice even. "And you have no business opening it." Linda reached my side, breath held between worry and exasperation. "Stephen, I'm fine," I murmured. "Ambulance is on the way," yelled Carol Pierce. A board member with permanent disapproval stamped between her brows. I heard sirens. 2 vehicles swung into the cul-de-sac, an ambulance and a patrol car. Deputy Mark Collins stepped out of the cruiser, lifted his sunglasses, and took in the scene with that tired cop's scan, the trembling complainant, the calm defendant, the tilted audience. "What happened?" he asked. "She rigged a trap," Bella's screamed, voice cracking. "On the community's mailbox, he tried to maim me." Mark looked at me. "Stephen, my mailbox," I said. "Federal domain. She opened it without my consent." "Again. Again," he said. I nodded toward my porch camera. "I have footage multiple nights. She's been removing my mail and others too. Today she got the message." Paramedics bent over Bella's hand. One of them, Tyler Reed, a kid young enough to still believe in perfect endings, peered at the welt. Not broken, skin pinched, ice and a bandage. Hospital Bella demanded, jaw tight. "I'm pressing charges." "Against me?" I asked, incredulous. "For assault," Carol snapped, stepping beside her queen. "The HOA will not tolerate." "The HOA," I said, "has no authority over a United States Postal Service mailbox. 18 U.S.C., Section 1708 theft or receipt of stolen mail. Also Section 1702 obstruction of correspondence. You want statutes, I can get you page numbers." Carol blinked. You could see the vocabulary land like hailstones. Mark lifted a hand. "All right. Everyone calm down." He turned to Bella. "Ma'am, did you have permission to open his mailbox?" She hesitated, rage hitching. "As HOA president, I have a duty to." "That's not a yes," Mark said. "I was inspecting for vandalism," she insisted. "We've had complaints about the sturdiness of certain boxes." A couple of neighbors coughed to hide their laughter. Mark's gaze slid back to me. "Do you have that footage handy?" "I do." I tapped my phone, opened the secure cloud folder, and mirrored it to my porch display. Infrared timestamps, GPS-locked metadata, the works. On the screen, the pink blazer glowed like a flare as Bella's hand slipped into my box at 2:47 a.m. Another clip, 1:13 a.m., the week prior. Another 3:05 a.m., 2 nights ago. In each, the motion was identical. Open take, tuck away. Her whisper too, community inspection complete. The crowd shifted, murmurs widening like ripples. "Turn that off," Carol snapped. "This is harassment." "No," Mark said quietly. "This is evidence." Paramedics guided Bella into the ambulance. She pointed at me with her good hand. "I'm not finished with you." "You never are," I said. The ambulance doors shut. The siren wailed. The vehicle rolled away, leaving a scent of diesel and dramatics. Mark took a slow breath. "Stephen, come by the station this afternoon. I'll take your statement and a copy of the footage." "You know you can't arrest her yet," I said. He cracked the ghost of a smile. "You used to wear my shoes. You know the dance. We build it right." "I've already started," I replied. "Chain of custody logs corroboration." "Good." He looked at Carol. "And you, the HOA, will refrain from inspections of mailboxes. They are not your jurisdiction." She stammered, then shuffled away under a scattering of neighborly side eyes. By noon, the cul-de-sac remembered how to breathe. I went inside and set my kitchen table like an evidence room laptop, external drive, printed logs. Linda set down a plate of eggs and toast, then crossed her arms. "You happy?" she asked. "Not yet," I said honestly. "But I'm getting there." She watched me for a long second, then softened. "Just don't lose yourself in this." I squeezed her hand. "I won't." I got to work. First, USPS tracking data. I pulled every tracking number for the past month, power bill, bank notice. A package my son sent with a multi-tool he swore would change my life. Each scan showed delivered at my address, precise minute, and GPS coordinate. Second, camera metadata. My trail cam and porch cam both embedded time, date, and device signatures. I exported the raw files, hashed them with a SHA-256 checksum, and wrote the hashes on paper. You don't rely on memory when you build a case. You nail it to the floor. Third, witnesses. I took a quiet walk. George Miller confirmed Bella had lectured him about his garbage bin at 2 a.m. the week prior. Said she was doing night patrol. Mrs. Jacobs remembered a missing insurance card. Dylan Brooks, a teacher who never picked sides, recalled seeing Bella at my mailbox late. I recorded each statement with their permission and had them sign a simple attestation. Fourth, pattern analysis. I laid out a calendar and drew red lines where the mail vanished. The red intersected nights when Bella's pink blazer glowed on my screen. A habit is a trap the mind sets for itself. All I had to do was point it out. At 2 p.m., I headed to the station. Mark ushered me into an interview room that smelled like disinfectant and old paper. I handed him a thumb drive with the video files, logs, and witness attestations. He watched another clip jaw tightening at the whisper, "Community inspection complete. I've spoken to the county attorney," he said. "They're cautious. Bella's claim is that she never opened any envelopes, just checked for vandalism. We'll need stronger proof of intent," I figured, I said. "So I made you a gift." I pulled a padded envelope from my briefcase. On the outside, bold letters read, "Certified check, do not bend." Inside was a single sheet of paper with a watermark that looked official but said absolutely nothing. The envelope had microdot tracer ink stamped inside the flap, a trick I learned back when smart thieves got cocky. "I placed this in my mailbox 3 nights in a row," I said. "Camera running." She took it the first time. "That's clip 2. Mark blinked. "You set this before the trap." "Yes. I didn't want to risk injury until I had clear-baited removal." I slid across the stills, Bella opening the box, lifting a padded envelope, this envelope tucking it under her arm. Then, 20 minutes later, she stopped at the community dumpster. "Next clip," I tapped. The camera I'd mounted across from the dumpsters showed her lifting the lid and dropping several items, including the padded envelope. "You went through the trash?" he asked, with gloves and a clear conscience. I opened a Ziploc bag and slid the empty envelope out, tagged with date, time, location, and a strong whiff of old lettuce. The microdot tracer ink still glowed faintly under a handheld UV light. "Recovered intact. No check, obviously. But you see the chain." Mark's brow rose. "Stephen, you beautiful, methodical man. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me this year." He laughed despite himself. Then he turned serious, tapping his pen. "With this, plus the video and statements, we're moving from suspicion to probable cause. I'll loop in the postal inspector's office and the county attorney. They'll want to interview her." "Interview away," I said. "Just be ready for theater." "We're always ready for theater," he replied. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mark, the HOA's going to spin. They'll say I'm harassing her, that I booby-trapped community property." "We'll address it," he said. "Keep your head down and your documentation tight. And Stephen." He held my gaze. "Don't escalate." "I won't," I said, and meant it. The trap had done its job, not to injure, but to stop. The real victory would be won with ink and pixels, not springs and steel. Back home, I found a HOA notice tucked into my doorframe. "Urgent board meeting tonight, 7:00 p.m. Topic: mailbox safety violations." Of course. I showed it to Linda, who rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd lodge in the back of her skull. "You're not going to that, are you?" she asked. "Oh, I'm going," I said. "And I'm bringing the law with me." At 7:00 sharp, the community room buzzed with whispers. Bella wasn't there, hospital no doubt, but Greg Turner, her husband, stood near the coffee urn, looking like a man who'd misplaced his courage. Carol banged a gavel on a folding table like it was the Supreme Court. "We are here," she intoned, "to address the egregious safety hazard Stephen Edwards created, which resulted in bodily harm to our respected president." "Respected," George muttered. A wave of snickers. I stepped forward before the story could calcify into rumor. "2 clarifications," I said, voice firm. 1, mailboxes are under federal jurisdiction. The HOA has no inspection authority. 2, I have video evidence of your president repeatedly removing mail from my box in the middle of the night." A hush fell. I set a small projector on the table and pressed play. Pink blazer, flashlight, envelope, whisper, dumpster. The collective inhale was a symphony. Greg's face crumpled with something like shame. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know." She said she was protecting the neighborhood. Protecting. Control loves costumes. Carol tried to rally. This isn't, we don't have the full context." "We will," I said, "with the sheriff and the postal inspector. Until then, you will leave everyone's mailbox alone." Silence. Then a few nods. A ripple of relief. The room, for the first time in months, seemed to remember who it belonged to. The people who lived there, not the one who lorded over them. When I got home, Linda met me at the door, relief softening her edges. "How bad?" "Surprisingly civilized," I said. "Truth has that effect." I sat at my desk and opened a new folder, Turner Case Formal. The last clip I added was from that morning, the traps, snap her, scream the crowd. Not for spite, for sequence, for completeness. For the story the facts tell when you arrange them in the right order. The evidence was no longer just pixels and paper. It was a map to the truth. And we were following it, one careful step at a time. The next morning felt unnaturally quiet. The kind of silence that follows a storm but promises another one soon. Maplewood Heights had always been a gossip machine, and by sunrise, the story of Bella Turner's mailbox injury had spread faster than a wildfire in August. From my porch, I could almost hear the whispers behind curtains. "Did you hear what Steven did? He booby-trapped the mailbox. I heard she's suing him already." It didn't matter what they thought. I wasn't out for popularity. I was out for justice, and I wasn't finished yet. Linda stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I turned to her, half smiling. "Enjoying, no. Satisfied, maybe." She shook her head. "Steven, you spent 25 years chasing criminals for the Postal Service. Don't turn this into another investigation. Let the sheriff handle it." "I am letting him handle it," I said. "But I'm also protecting myself. Bella's not done. Not by a long shot." And I was right. By noon, an official HOA letter appeared in my mailbox, irony not lost on me, sealed with a ridiculous gold sticker. Inside, the board accused me of reckless endangerment, creating unsafe community conditions, and violating HOA equipment integrity. They actually called my mailbox community equipment. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Then I filed the letter neatly under evidence harassment. The trap had done its job, but the war wasn't over. Bella was loud, but she wasn't stupid. If she couldn't win with intimidation, she'd use bureaucracy. She'd twist every bylaw, every ordinance, every loophole until she could pin me down. I needed to stay ahead 2 steps at least. That night, I reviewed all my footage again, frame by frame. Bella at the mailbox, Bella at the dumpster, the paramedics arriving. Each angle cataloged, each timestamp synced. But there was something new I noticed. Just before she reached my mailbox that morning, her phone's flashlight flickered, and in the reflection on the mailbox door, I saw a small glint. A key. Not her house key, a specific narrow metal key. One I recognized immediately, a master key for USPS-approved mailboxes. How the hell did she get one? Those keys weren't available to civilians. Each was serialized and tightly controlled by the Postal Service. I'd used them myself during inspections. If Bella had one, that meant she'd somehow convinced someone or stolen it to gain access. It changed everything. The next day, I paid a visit to my old colleague, Eddie Morales, at the post office. He greeted me with a mix of nostalgia and worry. "You again," he said. "I heard about the, incident." "Yeah," I replied. "I'm just here to ask one thing. Has anyone reported a missing master key recently?" He frowned, typing into his system. "Not in this district." "Why?" "Because I've got a video of a civilian using one." He looked up sharply. "That's a federal breach, Steven." "Exactly what I thought." Eddie leaned back. "Send me the clip. I'll forward it to the postal inspector's office. If she's got one of our keys, she's in deeper trouble than she knows." I handed him a drive, thanked him, and left feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The trap may have drawn blood, but this was the smoking gun. Back home, I decided to make my own bait. I crafted a decoy envelope labeled Confidential Tax Documents, Property Lot 22B. Inside was a single blank sheet, but the envelope was thick enough to look important. Then, as a final touch, I rubbed a tiny amount of UV tracking gel across the flap, invisible to the naked eye but glowing under a black light. If Bella or anyone touched it, I'd know. Linda caught me preparing it at the dining table and sighed. "I married a detective, didn't I?" "You married a man who hates thieves," I said. "And maybe enjoys traps a little too much," she teased. I grinned. What can I say? Old habits die hard. I placed the envelope neatly inside my newly reinforced mailbox, then set up 2 cameras, one hidden in the flower bed, another across the street disguised in a birdhouse. This time, the goal wasn't just to catch her red-handed, it was to prove pattern, intent, and access. The bait was set. For 2 days, nothing happened. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation, but Bella stayed quiet. Maybe she was still in the hospital. Maybe her lawyers had muzzled her. Then, on the 3rd morning at precisely 5:46 a.m., the motion sensor pinged. I opened the live feed on my phone. There she was, Bella Turner, bandaged hand, still in that damned pink blazer, creeping down the sidewalk like a cartoon villain. She looked around, glanced toward my porch, then approached the mailbox slowly. With her good hand, she pulled out the same silver key, inserted it, and opened the box. I watched as she lifted the confidential envelope, inspected it, and tucked it into her purse. Then, satisfied, she closed the box and walked briskly toward her SUV, parked at the corner. Gotcha. I followed her discreetly from my own car, parked 3 houses down. Years of surveillance training made me invisible. She drove to the community dumpster behind the HOA office, parked and climbed out with the envelope still in hand. For a moment she hesitated, then tore it open, frowned, and tossed it in the bin. She wiped her fingers on her blazer. And that was her final mistake. I parked half a block away and waited until she left. Then I walked to the dumpster, retrieved the envelope using gloves, and scanned it under a portable UV light. The fingerprints and streaks glowed like neon blue fire. When I got home, I recorded the evidence under full lighting, narrating like a true investigator, subject Bella Turner. Time 5:46 a.m. Act mail theft using unauthorized postal key. Exhibit A, recovered envelope with visible UV residue. Linda leaned on the doorway watching. You're making a documentary at this point. No, I said quietly. I'm making sure this never happens again. Later that day, I called Deputy Collins. He came over that afternoon with his notebook and his skeptical frown. You're telling me she came back again? Yup. Video timestamps, fingerprints, take your pick. I showed him everything. He watched the footage in silence, then whistled low. That's obsession, he said. She's not just inspecting mailboxes, she's fixated. She's addicted to control, I replied. She needs to feel in charge, even if it means breaking federal law. He took the UV-lit photos and my video copy. This is enough to escalate. I'll forward everything to the Postal Inspector's office in Denver. They'll open a federal case file. You might be hearing from an agent soon. Good, I said. Maybe they'll bring handcuffs. That night, the HOA board sent another letter, this one shorter, colder. Effective immediately, Stephen Edwards is suspended from HOA privileges pending review for endangering community safety. I laughed out loud. They're still protecting her. Linda sighed. Honey, you're up against an empire of busybodies. Then it's time to topple the empire, I said, smiling grimly. The next morning, a black sedan parked in front of my house. Out stepped a tall man in a dark suit, Agent Daniel Price, U.S. Postal Inspection Service. We shook hands and he spoke in that calm, professional tone I knew so well. Mr. Edwards, we reviewed the footage and evidence forwarded by Deputy Collins and your colleague Morales. Excellent work. Frankly, better documentation than most active inspectors provide. Old habits, I said. We've verified that Mrs. Turner indeed possesses an unauthorized postal master key. That alone is a felony. Combined with the theft footage, it's enough for a warrant. He smiled faintly. You've done half my job for me. Linda, standing by the door, muttered under her breath. Told you he enjoyed this. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the cul-de-sac, I watched the unmarked car pull up to Bella's house. 2 inspectors and Deputy Collins walked up her driveway. The neighbors peeked through blinds, whispering. 10 minutes later, Bella stepped out in handcuffs. She still had the bandage on her hand. For a moment, she caught my eye from across the street, and even then, even in defeat, her glare burned with indignation. I didn't gloat. I just nodded once, the kind of nod that says lesson delivered. The storm that started with a missing letter had finally broken, but deep down I knew this wasn't the end. The HOA still had teeth, and Bella's friends weren't done snarling yet. By dawn the next day, Maplewood Heights had turned into a courtroom with lawns. The arrest had happened quietly enough. 2 inspectors, 1 deputy, a pair of stainless steel bracelets, but quiet things make the loudest echoes. Every cul-de-sac has its own communications network. Ours just wore different costumes. Text threads, HOA email blasts, the Maplewood Neighborly app where kindness went to die. By breakfast, half the neighborhood had opinions, and the other half had torches. Linda slid a mug toward me. You're already trending, she said, tapping her phone. I took the mug and groaned. A post topped the feed, Is Stefan dangerous? Underneath a shaky photo of me on the porch from last month, watering petunias like a warlord. Dangerous, I said. I'm holding a hose. Context is for people who read, Linda replied. And people who read aren't on this app at 6 in the morning. I scrolled. Some neighbors defended me. Federal mailbox, federal law, end of story. Others clutched pearls. Violence is never the answer, even for mail theft. Carol Pierce, of course, had already posted a statement for the board. The HOA condemns reckless endangerment and is reviewing all mailbox safety protocols. Mailbox safety protocols, I muttered. Next, they'll demand helmets for envelopes. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Greg Turner on the step, wearing the look of a man who just discovered his house was built on a sinkhole. He held a foil-covered casserole like it was contraband. Linda likes chicken enchiladas, he mumbled. She gave me the recipe at the holiday party last year. Figured. Greg, I said gently, you don't owe us dinner. He nodded, throat-bobbing. I owe you respect, he said, surprising me. I kept telling myself Bella was helping, protecting the neighborhood. But seeing her in cuffs, his voice thinned. I should have known earlier. Linda appeared behind me and relieved him of the casserole. Come in, she said. Sit. You look like you've been standing all night. He stepped inside and perched on the edge of a chair, hands clasped. "I'm not here to excuse her," he said. "But she'll fight. She's already called 3 lawyers from the hospital. You're going to get letters, motions, restraining orders. She'll go scorched earth." "I believe you," I said. "And I'm ready." His eyes held mine for a beat. Then he stood. "If you need me, I'll testify," he said quietly. "I can't undo what she did, but I can stop pretending I didn't see it." After he left, Linda sliced into the casserole. "I don't know whether to hug him or stage an intervention," she said. "Both," I answered. "But later, we have a day coming." We did. By noon, a certified letter arrived via a very nervous courier. I signed, opened the envelope, and skimmed Turner v. Edwards' complaint for assault battery, reckless endangerment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The language was predictably operatic. I read the line twice, the one that called my mailbox a community fixture under HOA oversight. "Good," I said. "Good." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Because it's wrong," I replied, "and wrong is easy to dismantle." I scanned the complaint, saved it to the cloud, and sent a copy to Agent Daniel Price and Deputy Mark Collins with a note, as expected, proceeding calmly. Evidence log updated. I attached photos of the Gopher trap's tension settings, my modification notes, and the memo I'd written detailing my intent to deter theft, not injure. Intent matters in court, it's the hinge everything swings on. The next knock came from the other direction, local media. A reporter with hair sprayed against weather, Tara Bloom, stood at the curb and gave me a practiced, sympathetic smile. "Mr. Edwards, Tara, with Channel 8, she called. "Mind if we ask a few questions?" "I do mind," I said politely. "But I'll make one statement: federal mailbox, federal jurisdiction, federal evidence. The rest will happen in court." She nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "Can we get a shot of the mailbox? You can get a shot of the sun," I said, "which is just as public." She chuckled, despite herself. "Fair enough." They left. I breathed. The thing about being the center of a story is that everyone else wants a piece. The trick is not feeding them. An HOA email hit at 1:02 p.m. Subject line: Emergency Board Notice, Community Safety and Conduct. It was dripping with Carol's signature sanctimony. The board would hold a town hall that evening to address concerns about recent events and clarify the HOA's authority. Translation: a trial, without the tedious burden of law. "Are we going?" Linda asked. "We are," I said. "And we're bringing exhibits." I packed a folder, statutes printed in large font, a brief primer on 18 U.S.C. Section 1000, 702 and 1000, 708, and a laminated copy of the USPS Domestic Mail Manual sections on mailbox control. Evidence beats adjectives. At 4, Mark called. "County attorney is reviewing the federal piece," he said. "Bella's lawyer is arguing the trap was inherently dangerous." "Didn't break skin," I replied. "Mechanism adjusted. Medical report says contusion and swelling." I photographed the trap with a force gauge. He whistled. "You're a whole department, Stephen. Just a man who likes sleeping at night." He paused. "Watch your step at the town hall. Their strategy will be to bait you into anger. Don't give them the clip." "I won't," I said. "I'll give them the chapter and verse." At 6:30, we walked to the community center. The room was already electric, folding chairs, scraping whispers, ricocheting. A banner reading "Together, we keep Maplewood safe" sagged over the stage like a broken promise. Carol banged the gavel. "Order," she said, enjoying the word. "We are here to address the grievous incident involving Mr. Edwards and our beloved president, who is currently recovering from federal charges," someone muttered. Carol plowed ahead. "The HOA's responsibility is safety. In that spirit, we propose a resolution: all mailboxes will be inspected weekly by board-appointed volunteers." A low rumble moved through the room. I felt Linda stiffen beside me. I raised my hand. "Point of order," I said. "We don't do points of order," Carol snapped. "Then we do facts," I answered, stepping to the aisle. I set my folder on the projector stand, clicked, and a slide filled the wall. "Mailbox equals federal property" in black letters as plain as a hammer. Beneath it, 18 U.S.C. Section 1705, Destruction of letterboxes or mail. "This statute," I said, "is why your HOA can't lay a finger on my mailbox or anyone else's. You don't inspect it, you don't regulate it, you don't even touch it." Silence. Then I clicked again. 18 U.S.C. Section 1702, Obstruction of correspondence. Section 1708, theft or receipt of stolen mail. These, I continued, are why your president is in trouble. Because she did touch it. Repeatedly. I let the next slide play 30 seconds from my footage, no narration, no flourish. Pink blazer, flashlight, envelope, dumpster. The room exhaled as one. Even Carol closed her eyes. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, I said quietly. I came here to draw a boundary. Your board can decide trash can heights and fence stain colors. What you cannot do is step between a person and the law that protects them. From the third row, Mrs. Jacobs raised a hand. My insurance card never came, she said. I thought the mail lost it. Maybe it wasn't the mail. Across the aisle, George Miller added. She told me at 2 a.m. that she had the authority to check for vandalism. I believed her. I'm embarrassed I believed her. Shoulders lowered. The room felt less like a tribunal and more like a wake for the version of the neighborhood that trusted the wrong person. Carol cleared her throat, softening because she had to. In light of new information, she said the inspection resolution is tabled, a ripple of relief. And until further notice, the board defers to law enforcement. Wise, I said, and sat down. After the meeting, people lined up, handshakes, apologies, a few teary confessions of missing mail. I took notes. Names, dates, a map of harm we hadn't wanted to see. When the line thinned, a woman I barely knew, Paige Holloway, approached. I'm the HOA secretary, she whispered. Bella kept a file cabinet at the office. A locked one. You should ask the police to search it. Why tell me, I asked. Because the rest of the board is afraid. I'm tired of being afraid. I nodded. Thank you. Outside, the air was cool and fragile. We walked home under streetlights that had seen too many petty wars. Halfway down the block, Agent Price stepped from the shadow of a sycamore. Town hall go well, he asked. As well as a root canal, I said. Do you have a warrant for the HOA office? Judge signs in the morning, he replied. We're looking for the key, any logs and mail fragments. And Stephen He glanced back toward the center. Your presentation helped. Good, I said. They needed to understand the edge they stepped over. When we reached the house, Linda took my hand. You were calm, she said. I'm proud of you. I rehearsed calm in the mirror, I admitted. Beats rehearsing contempt. She laughed, soft and tired. We sat on the porch saying nothing for a while. The mailbox gleamed in the street lamp, a small square line in the sand. My phone buzzed. A new email from Bella's attorney. Subject line, settlement discussion. The body was short and oily. Our client is open to a mutual de-escalation agreement if you remove all traps and refrain from public statements. I stared at the screen until the words lost shape. Then I typed a reply in 12 measured words. All traps removed. All statements factual. See you in federal court. I hit send, closed the laptop, and breathed. The storm was still overhead. But for the first time, it felt like we were choosing where the lightning struck. The morning after the town hall, Maplewood Heights looked deceptively peaceful, trimmed lawns, sprinklers ticking rhythmically, mail trucks humming down the street. But under that calm surface, a current of unease ran strong. People who once waved politely now avoided eye contact, whispering in driveways and behind blinds. Linda brought me coffee and the morning paper. You made the front page, she said, half amused, half exasperated. I unfolded it. There I was, grainy photo captioned HOA, Power Struggle Turns, Federal Mailbox Trap Sparks Investigation. Federal, I said, taking a sip. Has a nice ring to it. She rolled her eyes. Don't get cocky, Stephen. The board's scared, the neighbors are split, and Bella's lawyers will twist everything. She wasn't wrong. Around noon, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Agent Daniel Price from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the same man who'd overseen Bella's arrest. His partner, Agent Nora Fields, followed carrying a case file thick enough to bury the HOA in paperwork. Morning, Mr. Edwards, Price said. Mind if we come in? We've got updates. Please, I said, motioning toward the living room. They sat professional but cordial. Price opened the folder. We executed the warrant on the HOA office early this morning. I leaned forward, and he exchanged a glance with Nora, who slid a series of photos across the table. My eyes widened. Inside Bella's office drawer, they'd found dozens of opened envelopes, all marked with addresses from Maplewood Heights, bank statements, medical bills, even Christmas cards. But that wasn't all. There were handwritten notes, lists of residents, their fines, their private disputes, and beside each mail checked. She wasn't just stealing, Nora said. She was using the mail to build dossiers on homeowners. Probably to threaten or control them through HOA policy. A low whistle escaped me. She ran the neighborhood like a spy ring, pretty much Price said. She even had a file on you. Want to see it? He handed me a folder labeled Edwards, Mail Activity. Inside were printed copies of my bills, and, to my disgust, a report titled, Surveillance Concern Edwards' Camera May Violate HOA Privacy Rules. She was watching you while accusing you of spying, Nora said. I laughed bitterly. Projection at its finest. Price's tone hardened. Stephen, this goes beyond HOA drama. She's facing charges for federal mail theft, possession of unauthorized postal keys, and obstruction. We've referred it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the HOA board, I asked. That's where it gets tricky, Nora said. Some of them claim ignorance, others, well, we found emails suggesting they knew she was monitoring mail. Which means conspiracy, I said quietly. Potentially, Price replied. The county prosecutor's reviewing that angle. In the meantime, she's out on bail, but legally she can't come within 500 feet of you or any mailbox in the neighborhood. Linda exhaled. Finally, some peace. I shook my head. Temporary peace. Bella Turner doesn't quit, she schemes. That evening, I decided to walk the neighborhood just to feel the air shift. People avoided me not out of hostility but out of fear of taking sides. Except one. George Miller, my neighbor from 2 houses down, stood by his fence with a cigarette and guilt in his eyes. Hey, Stephen, he said quietly. Got a minute? Sure. He rubbed his neck. I was on the board, you know that. Bella. She convinced us the inspections were legal. Said she had permission from the post office. Did you believe her? I asked. He nodded shamefully. We all did. She showed us that Key said it was official. She probably told you she was protecting the neighborhood. Exactly. He kicked the dirt. I didn't realize she was building files on us too until the agents showed up this morning. She even had my mortgage info. You're not the first, I said. You might want to call Agent Price and make a statement. It'll help. He nodded. I will. And Stephen? His voice dropped lower. You should know, Carol's been deleting HOA emails. I saw her shredding papers this morning. Destroying evidence looks that way. I thanked him and turned back home. The quiet streets suddenly felt like corridors in a crime scene. The next morning, I stopped by the sheriff's office. Deputy Collins was waiting coffee in one hand, a thick manila folder in the other. Morning, he said. You were right about the board. They're panicking. We've got confirmation Carol tried to delete HOA records after the warrant hit. I raised an eyebrow. That's obstruction, isn't it? He smirked. You'd know better than I do, former inspector. We shared a look. He continued. Thing is the rest of the board's splitting apart. Some are ready to cooperate. One of them, Paige Holloway, the secretary, handed over this. He opened the folder. Inside were screenshots of HOA group emails, Bella's personal notes, and a message thread labeled Monitoring List. The list contained every homeowner's address and short comments: Edwards, suspicious ex-Federal Watch closely Jacobs, overdue HOA fees, check mail Pierce, ally loyal Miller, weak, easily pressured. This, Mark said, tapping the page, is how she kept control. I leaned back. She used intimidation disguised as administration. He nodded. We're forwarding all this to the DA. Bella's facing serious time, 5 to 10 years federal minimum. But there's something else you should know. He flipped another page. A recent police report filed from Bella's hospital room, complaint of retaliation and harassment against Stephen Edwards. She's saying you stalked her, he said flatly. I groaned. Let me guess, she'll claim I hacked her phone next. She might, Mark said. But don't worry. Between the timeline, the witnesses, and your video logs, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. Still be ready. She's desperate. Desperate people are dangerous, I said. He nodded. Exactly. Back home, Linda met me on the porch. I just got off the phone with Susan Bennett, the interim HOA president. She's asking you to attend the emergency board meeting tonight. Oh, I'll attend, I said, and I'm bringing backup. That evening, the meeting hall was half full, no longer packed like before fear had drained the room. The board sat behind folding tables, faces pale under fluorescent lights. Susan, calm and firm, opened the session. We're here to discuss leadership restructuring and transparency, she said, and to publicly address the misconduct of our former president, Mrs. Turner. Carol shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I noticed the absence of her clipboard, a rare sign of humility. Susan continued. We've received cooperation from federal investigators. Moving forward, all HOA records will be audited. We'll also establish a resident oversight committee. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Then Susan turned to me. Mr. Edwards, you've been the center of much controversy. I'd like you to share your perspective. I stood scanning the room. For months, Bella used power as a weapon. She used fear disguised as rules. And she used the mail, your mail, to control you. This wasn't about lawns or paint colors. It was about domination. But here's the thing. I paused, lowering my tone. She only had power because everyone let her have it. Silence. Then, slowly, people nodded. From the back, George spoke up. No more secrets. No more hiding behind bylaws. A murmur of agreement followed. Susan smiled faintly. Then let's rebuild the HOA for what it was supposed to be. A community, not a kingdom. For the first time, the room didn't feel divided. It felt awake. After the meeting, Price called me with one final update. The U.S. Attorney just approved the charges, he said. Mail theft, unauthorized key possession, and conspiracy. Bella's going to federal court. Likely prison. I exhaled, the tension in my chest finally easing. It's over then, almost, he said. She still has a civil suit pending against you, but with her criminal conviction ahead, it won't go far. I smiled faintly. Thank you, Agent Price, he chuckled. Don't thank me. You built the case. You just forgot to retire. That night, Linda and I sat outside under a quiet sky. The air smelled of pine and new beginnings. You did it, she said softly. No, I said. We did it. The neighborhood finally stood up. Across the street, the old HOA office sat dark, the once feared center of control, now sealed with federal tape. For the first time in a long while, Maplewood Heights felt like a neighborhood again. And as the wind rustled through the trees, I thought about how something as small as a letter, a single stolen envelope, had unraveled an empire of deceit. Sometimes justice doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's delivered one mailbox at a time. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like lemon polish and nerves. I wore my one good suit, the charcoal one Linda calls your reasonable man uniform. She straightened my tie, kissed my cheek, and said, breathe. Facts win if you let them. Facts and patience. I reminded myself of both as we rode the elevator to Judge Nancy Reynolds' courtroom for Turner v. Edwards. Bella's civil suit against me for assault battery, reckless endangerment, and emotional distress. The criminal matter against her was on a different floor later, but every hallway in this building felt like a chessboard. Bella was already seated at counsel table, hair set bandage, visible eyes hard. Her attorney, a slick man with a perfect haircut named Martin Hale, adjusted his cufflinks like they were arguments. On our side sat Rachel Cole, my attorney, cool as a midwinter lake. Behind us, Deputy Mark Collins, Agent Daniel Price, Agent Nora Fields, Postmaster Eddie Morales, Paige Holloway, the HOA Secretary, George Miller, Mrs. Jacobs, and half of Maplewood Heights, disguised as interested citizens. The clerk called the case. Judge Reynolds entered sharp-eyed and unsentimental. Counsel appearances. We rose, introduced ourselves, and Saturday Hale went first, silky and aggrieved. Your Honor, this is simple. Mr. Edwards booby-trapped a mailbox, a community fixture causing grievous injury to my client Mrs. Turner, a grandmother and a volunteer leader dedicated to safety. His conduct was intentional, malicious, and emblematic of a man who cannot coexist within a neighborhood. He let that hang, then added, we are seeking compensatory and punitive damages and an injunction preventing Mr. Edwards from installing dangerous mechanisms on community property. Judge Reynolds lifted a brow. Community property, Hale smiled. The HOA maintains oversight of fixtures for the common good, Your Honor. Rachel stood. Not mailboxes, she said gently, and we'll show that. Hale called Bella Turner. She walked to the stand with the gait of a martyr bearing a cross. After swearing in, she dabbed at the corner of her eye and fixed the juryless courtroom with a practiced tremor. I was conducting a standard safety inspection, she said. We've had vandalism, Mr. Edwards' mailbox looked tampered. I opened it to ensure it was secure, and a metal device snapped on my hand. I screamed. I was hospitalized. I still have numbness. Hale produced glossy hospital photos, swollen hand, purple bruising, and a page from the HOA bylaws board may conduct inspections of structures visible from the street to ensure uniform safety and aesthetic. And this, Hale said, is what happens when a man thinks the rules don't apply to him. Rachel rose for cross-opening with a single sheet, 18 U.S.C. Section 1705. She laid it on the witness ledge. Mrs. Turner, do you see the words, United States Postal Service here? Bella hesitated. I'm not a lawyer. Nor am I asking for legal analysis. Rachel said, voice warm as velvet over steel. "I'm asking if you can read the plain language. Whoever willfully or maliciously injures, tears down, or destroys any letterbox placed for the receipt or delivery of mail on any mail route shall be fined or imprisoned. You recognize that your HOA bylaws do not supersede federal law, correct?" Bella's jaw ticked. "We inspect for safety." Rachel nodded like a teacher, encouraging a half-right answer. "Let's talk about safety. Did you have permission from Mr. Edwards to open his mailbox?" Silence. "Did you have written authority from the United States Postal Service?" More silence. "Is this you?" Rachel asked, as a screen lit up with night vision opening Mr. Edwards' mailbox at 2:47 a.m., removing mail and whispering, "Community inspection complete." "It's unclear," Bella said, voice tight. "Is this you?" The next clip played, dropping a padded envelope in the HOA dumpster 20 minutes later. "That could be anyone," Bella snapped. Rachel smiled politely and picked up a clear bag. Inside lay the recovered padded envelope. "It's definitely the envelope," she said, "stamped with a UV tracer. The residue glowed on your bandage when Agent Fields photographed it the morning of your arrest. The lights dimmed. Under a short UV video, fingerprints blazed. A few gasps tumbled from the gallery. Hale objected, prejudicial, and the judge overruled. It goes to rebut plaintiff's narrative. Rachel's questions moved with the elegance of a scalpel. "Mrs. Turner, do you recognize this metal key?" She held up the unauthorized postal master key recovered from Bella's desk. "Did you use it to open mailboxes in Maplewood Heights?" "That key was found," Bella said. "I never used it." "Is that your reflection?" Rachel asked in Mr. Edwards' mailbox, holding a key of identical shape. The paused frame showed a sliver of metal like a caught silverfish. Bella swallowed. "I was protecting the community." Rachel turned to the judge. "Nothing further for this witness right now." Hale tried to rehabilitate Bella, but the air had shifted. The halo of victimhood had slipped. Underneath was a person who believed rules yielded to her will. Rachel called Postmaster Eddie Morales. "He testified that all of my missing items were scanned, delivered at my box. USPS logs were consistent, precise, and complete. If the customer didn't receive them, he said it's because someone removed them after delivery." She called paramedic Tyler Reed, who calmly described Bella's injuries as consistent with a sprung clamp, non-lacerating, non-fracture, painful but superficial. She called Deputy Mark Collins to authenticate chain of custody, the videos, the envelope, the dumpster retrieval. She called Agent Daniel Price, who confirmed the key's illegality and the search of the HOA office. "We found a set of files containing open mail and homeowner dossiers. Possession of federal mail and unauthorized keys is a felony." Then Paige Holloway took the stand, palms trembling but voice steady. She testified to internal emails, monitoring lists, mail checks, and Bella's directive, "We need leverage. Use what you find." The courtroom murmured. Hale objected to hearsay. Rachel produced the printed, authenticated emails. The judge admitted them. Finally, Rachel called me. "I testified to intent. I had adjusted. The Gopher trap's tension, photographed the settings, documented my purpose: deter theft, not injure. I described my career in the inspection service, the statutes I lived by, and the difference between revenge and boundary setting." Hale approached, smiling like a shark at a goldfish convention. "Mr. Edwards, you enjoyed this, didn't you?" "I enjoyed ending theft," I said. "You set a trap," he pressed. "For a person." "I set a deterrent inside my federally protected mailbox after weeks of documented theft," I replied. "And I informed law enforcement, preserved evidence, and never concealed my actions." He waved the hospital photos like a flag. "This is not deterrent. This is harm." Rachel stood. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe these photographs have been digitally altered to exaggerate swelling." Judge Reynolds leaned forward. "On what basis?" Rachel nodded to Agent Fields, who explained, "The photo metadata shows save-over edits using a phone app 5 hours after the ER visit. The ER's own records describe mild contusion. The photos depict severe edema, not noted clinically." Hale sputtered. "Speculation, expert testimony," Fields said calmly. "And we have the ER notes." The judge flipped through the file, then fixed Hale with an arctic stare. "Counsel, if you knowingly submitted altered images, we will be discussing sanctions." Hale sank an inch. Rachel rested our case with a quiet, "The truth doesn't need adjectives." Hale's closing tried to rekindle outrage. "What kind of neighbor sets traps, but it had the rhythm of a song no one cared to hum?" Rachel's closing was spare federal property, federal law-documented theft, reasonable deterrent, and a plaintiff whose story unraveled under light. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses, folded her hands, and spoke deliberately. This is not a close case. The plaintiff's claims rest on the false premise that an HOA's aesthetic authority extends to federal mailboxes. It does not. The evidence demonstrates Mrs. Turner repeatedly accessed and removed mail not addressed to her using an unauthorized key. Mr. Edwards' conduct was targeted to protect his property and assist law enforcement. While I do not endorse the use of any device that can injure the record, shows he calibrated the mechanism to be non-lacerating and promptly sought lawful remedies. She looked at Bella. You have misused power and then sought shelter beneath it. Then, back to the record. All claims against Mr. Edwards are dismissed with prejudice. I grant Mr. Edwards' counterclaim for injunctive relief. Mrs. Turner and the HOA are enjoined from inspecting, opening, or otherwise interfering with any mailbox within Maplewood Heights. Additionally, given evidence of tampering and bad faith, I award attorney's fees and costs to Mr. Edwards. I am referring potential perjury and evidence tampering to the district attorney. Her gavel fell. The sound carried finality. In the corridor, the air felt 10 pounds lighter. Neighbors clustered, whispering relief. Linda squeezed my hand until my knuckles popped. You did it, she whispered. Judge did it, I said. We just brought the pieces. We were halfway to the elevators when 2 U.S. Marshals strode past, followed by Agent Price. He nodded to me, then turned to Carol Pierce, who was pale as printer, paper clutching a tote. Miss Pierce, he said, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, destruction of HOA records under warrant. He lifted a bag containing a shredded paper confetti. We pulled this from your trunk. Carol blanched. Bella told me. You can tell the judge, Price said. Across the hall, Bella froze as another marshal approached. Mrs. Turner, he said, you're wanted upstairs in criminal courtroom 4B. The grand jury just returned an indictment. Her eyes found mine, fire and disbelief warring in them. For a long second, neither of us looked away. Then she turned chin high and walked toward her next storm. I exhaled. Linda leaned into me. Ready to go home, for the first time in weeks, I said. We stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I caught a last glimpse of the marble corridor, a place where echoes used to sound like threats, and now sounded like the law doing exactly what it was built to do. The days after the trial felt like a new season. The storm had broken, leaving the air washed clean, almost too quiet. Maplewood Heights, the same suburb that once pulsed with gossip and control, now moved differently. Slower, cautious. Like a neighborhood waking from a bad dream and realizing the dream was real. I spent the first morning after the verdict rebuilding my mailbox. Not because I had to, it still stood proudly, the trap removed, but because I wanted to. Closure deserved ceremony. I sanded the wood, polished the hinges, and mounted a brass plate on the front that gleamed in the Sunday tamper, once learned forever. Linda watched from the porch, sipping her tea. It's beautiful, she said. Just as should be, I replied, even in brass. 3 houses down the old HOA office sat empty, taped with bold red stickers, evidence sealed. Federal property. A reminder that power once abused doesn't retire quietly, it gets repossessed. The new HOA president, Susan Bennett, stopped by that afternoon. She was a calm woman, the kind who measured twice before speaking once. Stephen, she said, I wanted to thank you. I know it's been a ride. I smiled. I didn't plan on being the community's folk hero, but I'll take the title. She chuckled. You know, when Bella first proposed making Maplewood Heights the most secure neighborhood in the state, I thought she meant better lighting. Turns out she meant surveillance. She wanted control, I said. Security was just the costume. Susan nodded, looking toward the street. We're rebuilding the board, smaller, cleaner. I'd like you to advise on compliance informally. Advising an HOA, I said, half laughing. That's how people end up on medication. Not this one, she said softly. We'll do it right this time. Her tone was sincere. I agreed on one condition, no fines for mailbox colors. She smiled. Deal. News spread beyond our street. A small story on a local channel turned into a headline on a national blog. Retired federal inspector outsmarts HOA president in mail theft scandal. The comments were pure gold, half of them cheering, half confessing their own HOA horror stories. One read, "This man is living every homeowner's revenge fantasy." Linda read them aloud between bursts of laughter. You've gone viral, she said. Maybe you should start a podcast, Mail Justice, with Stephen Edwards. I shook my head. I'd rather start a garden. But she was right about one thing people were hungry for: justice stories, the kind that reminded them that standing your ground didn't require shouting, just persistence. A week later, I got a call from Agent Price. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Turner pled out this morning. 2 counts of mail theft, 1 count of key possession, 6 months federal time, 2 years probation. Only 6 months, I asked. She had no priors, and the judge credited her community service history. I laughed. Her service to the community was stealing its mail. Price chuckled. Justice isn't perfect, Stephen, but it's still justice. And the HOA conspiracy angle is still under review. We've got Carol and a couple others facing obstruction charges. I'll take that, I said. Appreciate the call. When I hung up, Linda was watching from the hallway. That was him, wasn't it, Price? Yeah, I said. Bella's getting 6 months in Club Fed. Good, she said. Maybe she'll have time to reflect. Knowing her, she'll probably start an HOA in prison. We both laughed until we cried. That weekend, the neighborhood held its first real community barbecue. Not the kind Bella used to host, those were more like interrogations with lemonade, but a real one. No clipboards, no citations, no fake smiles. Just food music, and the feeling of life returning. George manned the grill apron covered in barbecue sauce. Mrs. Jacobs brought her famous peach cobbler. Kids raced their bikes down the once-patrolled streets, free for the first time in years. At one point, Susan raised a glass. To Stephen and Linda Edwards for standing up when the rest of us were too scared to. People clapped, and I felt my throat tighten. I didn't stand up for applause. I said, just for peace. And for anyone who's ever been told that's just how things are, they're not. They're only that way until someone says no. That earned a cheer loud enough to make the dogs bark. As the evening stretched into sunset, I looked around the cul-de-sac, the place that had nearly turned into a battlefield, and for the first time since we'd moved here, it actually looked like a neighborhood again. Later that night, Linda and I sat on the porch under the stars. The new mailbox shone faintly in the streetlight, its brass plate catching the glow like a medal. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you regret any of it? She asked. I thought for a moment. No, I said, because the truth is, if I hadn't done something, she would have kept going, and everyone else would have kept pretending not to notice. Linda smiled. You sound like the man I married, the one who used to chase criminals through snowstorms for missing packages. I chuckled. Well, this time the crime came to me. Do you think she'll change? She asked softly. I glanced at the dark silhouette of Bella's house down the street. The blinds were drawn, the driveway empty. Maybe. But even if she doesn't, everyone else did. And that's enough. 2 weeks later, I received a letter, not email, not a notice, but a handwritten letter sealed with careful precision. The return address, FMC Carswell Federal Prison Camp. Linda raised an eyebrow. You gonna open that? I hesitated, then nodded. Inside, in looping cursive, it read, Stephen, you won. I hope that makes you happy. I thought I was protecting people. Maybe I was just protecting my ego. I won't apologize for everything, but I will admit one thing: you were right about the mail. It's not power, it's trust. I broke that, and now I understand what it costs. Bella T. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it aside. Linda asked, what did she say? I smiled faintly. Something almost human. By autumn, Maplewood Heights felt reborn. The HOA meetings became shorter, quieter. Instead of fines, they offered free gardening help for older residents. Kids sold lemonade on corners without fear of violating beverage ordinances. And my mailbox became a neighborhood symbol. People stopped by just to see it, as if it represented something more than metal and wood. Maybe it did. One Sunday afternoon, Susan unveiled a new plaque at the community entrance. It read, Maplewood Heights, a place built on respect, not rules. She turned to me. Think that'll stick, I smiled. As long as people remember why it needed to be written. That night, as the wind rustled through the maple trees, I thought back to the day it all started. A stolen letter, a smirk, a pink blazer under the sundae. It felt like a lifetime ago. But I realized something: justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or badges. Sometimes it comes from the simple act of saying this far, no farther. I watched the porch light flicker across my rebuilt mailbox, strong, polished, proud. A monument not to revenge, but to boundaries, to decency. To the idea that even in a world full of Karens and power-hungry neighbors, there's still room for quiet people who refuse to be bullied. And as the night deepened, I whispered the words I hadn't said aloud since it all began. You can steal my mail, Bella Turner, but you'll never steal my peace. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning, it's about standing firm. About saying no to manipulation, control, and fear, even when you're standing alone. Because peace isn't something the world gives you. It's something you protect inch by inch, letter by letter, boundary by boundary. If you've ever faced your own HOA, Karen, remember you don't have to yell to fight back. You just have to know your rights, hold your ground, and let the truth speak louder than noise. What would you have done if someone kept stealing your mail? And don't forget to hit subscribe because next week's story, let's just say, karma upgrades to first-class delivery.